What's up, everybody, and welcome back. Short episode here, but I want to fill you guys in on some things that I'm hearing about Scarlett, which is the next generation Xbox, more specifically, a family of devices. And so I'm starting to get a little bit more information about what exactly that family means right now. And I'm not saying this is how it's going to launch, but what I'm hearing right now is that there's at least two pieces of hardware, at least two. And so there is, first and foremost, and I want to be really clear, there's a traditional console. And when I mean traditional, I mean something like this guy right back here, the Xbox One X. I'm talking about a big slab of hardware that you buy, you bring home, and it's like the consoles that you have known for the past, whatever, 20, 30 years. But on the other side, there's something called Scarlett Cloud. And what this is the streaming service from Microsoft. And we've been hearing about this for many years. And in fact, insiders at the company are saying that the streaming service is much further along than the traditional console. It's actually much closer to, say, release than the other device. Now, I don't think they're going to launch them separately. I think this is going to be sort of like a package announcements coming in 2020. But here's the deal. So that streaming box or console or whatever you want to call it, Microsoft thinks that they've actually finally kind of figured out what the right mix and match components are for having local hardware and streaming hardware. So Microsoft is working on this cloud streaming service, and how it's going to work is that the game is going to run in the cloud. This should all sound familiar. We've seen things from like OnLive and other services, but they've all kind of failed because of one major issue called latency. And if you're not familiar with latency, that's from what it is from when you do an input on your controller or whatever to seeing the reaction on the screen. And so when you have things running in the cloud, there's an issue with that latency because you have things happening hundreds of miles away that's got to go over the internet. Obviously, we know that light speed is fast, but there's issues there. And so Microsoft thinks that they figured this out, how to do this. And so what I'm hearing right now is that the streaming portion of Scarlett is actually going to also have a local hardware component as well, a much lower cost component. And what this device is going to do is it's only going to be responsible for the latency specific items, meaning controller input, meaning collisions, such as when somebody gets hit by a bullet. Microsoft is building out a way to look at games and understand them and put them into what's one person called slices, another person called them splices, something along this line where it can take snippets of the game and put them on local hardware to take care of the latency issue. Meanwhile, the rest of the game, such as the real world, like the trees in the background, the buildings and all that stuff, are actually happening in the cloud. And so the idea here is that cloud console, whatever you want to call it, Microsoft had a previous device called Hobart, codenamed. Wasn't quite like this, but I think it was an attempt to go down a similar route. But I think they're onto the right path now. Is that that cloud-based hardware console, cloud console, whatever you want to call it, is going to be much less expensive. And so when they launch Scarlett, they could have a very premium offering like the Xbox One X, which is $400 or $500, and then they could have the streaming iteration for people who have high bandwidth connectivity that costs I've heard anywhere from under $100 to up to about $125, somewhere around that price point, potentially even lower. But that's the idea: is that they will have most of the game running in the cloud, but developers will have to build out specific aspects of their game. At least that's how they're pitching it right now, that they need to call out the collision so that it can be run on the on the cloud console. Now here's the key: all Scarlett games are expected to be able to run on both the console and the streaming service. There can't be any differentiator. That was a big concern when this news was starting to come out, that Microsoft might not let first-person shooters run on the streaming console because, again, of latency issues. I'm hearing that is not the case, that the game has to run on all platforms if it's going to be allowed to be sold on the Xbox Scarlett. And so, again, look for that in 2020. It's going to be a streaming service with local hardware that is going to take care of the latency specific issues. And Microsoft is, they think they've got this figured out. And so there's a little bit more to it. I've linked to the write-up below. And I'll be curious to see what you guys think about having still to buy local hardware, because there was a lot of talk saying, hey, maybe we don't have to buy hardware at all. But I think there's, at least for like connecting to something like that, like a large screen, you will. But But the interesting idea here is if it's relatively low power hardware, this is going to how Microsoft is going to achieve their dream of running Xbox games on anything. Doesn't matter smartphones, doesn't matter laptops and all that. And you can see how building out that cloud service is going to be a massive advantage for Microsoft, because Sony, granted, the PlayStation does great and sells exceptionally well, but they're going to have trouble building out a service like this because Microsoft already has roughly 50 data centers around the world that can deliver the streaming aspect. They now have Game Pass, which we all know is a front runner to it. And then you also look at things like Fastboot that Microsoft just introduced with the latest beta of the Xbox software that allows you to start those streaming games even faster. And this is all building up the narrative of delivering a truly seamless cloud streaming service from all aspects of the game. And so this will be really interesting to watch. Again, this is early days and things could obviously change, but Microsoft thinks they finally had the formula figured out. They're starting to loop in developers on this stuff. And yeah, so that is what's going on. And that's just a small little update on Scarlett and what is happening. And you know what? Thanks for tuning in, guys, and I'll catch you next time.